So I just wanted to make a video, talk about my personal experiences going from skiing to snowboarding. So a little bit of a backstory. Pretty, or at least was pretty proficient with skiing. I mean, I haven't actually gone skiing in like I don't know, probably close to I don't know, maybe 7, 10 years on that, just because of life, school, whatnot. Um, but when I was skiing, I was pretty good at it. I was able to do black diamonds no problem. It was really easy. I basically grew up skiing. Um, and it wasn't until the last few years, I would say, that I've been starting to do snowboarding a little more recently, or more often. And I tried snowboarding once about 10, 15 years ago. On one of my last trips, my family typically went on skiing trips growing up. So I usually do that with them. And one of the last ones we did, I tried out snowboarding. Now snowboarding is quite a different experience than skiing, as I'm sure many of you probably know. Um, so like obviously, like with skiing, you literally have both feet operating independently of each other. I kind of view it like skating. Like skating and um yeah, I guess that's probably the best reference to use is skating, which I also do a lot of, and still do occasionally. Obviously not as much now because of the pandemic and stuff. And even any outdoor activity is difficult these days with the pandemic and traveling and stuff, which is unfortunate, but life happens. You just gotta roll with the punches. Um, but yeah, so getting into the difference in experiences. So the biggest thing that is initial thing that I noticed with having to sort of um, get used to is the fact that both your feet are strapped in on one board. So you don't have the independent operation of each leg as you do with skiing anymore. You got to get used to both your feet being strapped in and operating together, um, in unity, in a sense, I guess. Um, uh, it's a weird experience. It's a weird feeling. Because for me personally, having done skiing for a majority of my life, and then switching to snowboarding, my feet are still trying to. They're literally still fighting to try and steer themselves in one way or another. Um, I mean, you can learn, you can watch videos, you can observe other people, snowboarding, you can take class in snowboarding, but none of that will change um, how your body, your muscle memory will actually integrate and use that visual knowledge, or you know read knowledge, however you obtain a knowledge to get an idea of how to do snowboarding, whether it's from a book or talking with someone or visually seeing it being done. It's one thing to learn about, it's another thing to actually put into practice. And just like with anything in life, it's it takes a bit more time for your body to integrate what you've learned and put it into practice with the muscle memory. So that's something and I'm getting better at it. But it's something that took some time to really fully integrate, or integrate more than it was before. Obviously, I'm still learning quite a bit. I've only done snowboarding a few times thus far. But just like anything in life, they say practice makes perfect, and I mean, not saying that I will ever get to perfect with snowboarding, but it's always the journey that's the most important thing, not necessarily the destination. Um, so yeah, with snowboarding, um, once you kind of get your body used to the idea of being, you know, your feet working together instead of working more, in a sense, independent from each other, it gets a little bit easier. but it takes a few times to kind of really get a feel for that different experience of both feet being strapped in, working together with each other. And uh, there's also one thing that they talk about with snowboarding that's different from skiing. Good advice. It's like you know uh, riding on a skateboard or surfing or things like that. It's basically the same idea of which is your dominant foot and your non-dominant foot. The one that's in the front, because the back one is the one that's steering. The front one is just trying to um, keep you going the right direction. Like yeah, I guess I'm still kind of I'm nowhere. I'm certainly not an expert on this for sure. I'm still learning myself, and some of my terminology may be a bit off, but I'm learning. Um, and I'm mostly just going off of based on how the body responds to it from my experience. Um, so if you want to learn more about terminology, definitely search more on the internet or ask an expert or get some training, whatever the case would be, because I don't have quite that much knowledge on it, to be honest. Um, but uh, but yeah, so even if you don't necessarily know what your dominant foot is, um, which there's this test I learned years ago when I had tried out snowboarding once. Is you stand with both feet together, and have someone behind you push you, you know, not aggressively, just somewhat gently, and whichever foot, you know, uh, proceeds forward first, that is your, I believe, your non-dominant foot. So that'll be the foot that goes in the front on a snowboard. Um, and so after my body kind of got used to the idea of, and they're still getting used to it. It's still a learning process for me, for my body at least. Like I kind of know the logistics of it and have an idea of how to do it, but actually, becoming comfortable with it, it's something I'm still working on. Um, but yeah, so once you kind of get used to the feeling of being on a snowboard, then it's because obviously the first objective is to be able to handle being on a snowboard without falling over. Because if you can't stay up on a snowboard without falling over, then you're not going to get very far. So it's just and you are going to fall quite a bit when you're snow. Just anything you learn when you're learn to ride a bike, skate, whatever it may be, you're gonna fall quite a few times, or at least a few times, most likely. So that's gonna happen. That's why we wear padding and we wear layers or protective gear, whatever the case be, or in the case of snowboarders, helmets. Granted, I don't typically wear a helmet snowboarding, but that's my own personal choice, taking my own risk, not telling you not to do that, but it's my choice. So if you decide not to as well, that's your choice as well. Um, but it's definitely safer to wear a helmet, obviously. In any case, but uh, but yeah, so you're gonna fall quite a bit when you first start learning to snowboard. Just getting your body used to the feeling of having both feet strapped in. But once you get used to that, then it's a matter of learning how to steering the board. That's something I'm getting better as well. There's the as I call it. I'm not sure this is the actual terminology, but as I call it, the heel turn versus the toe turn. I think the heel turn, as I've asked some snowboarders as well that I've interacted with, the heel turn is a lot easier to perform than the toe turn. Um, and I believe the reason for that is the fact that we're like myself sitting in a chair right now. Um, my feet aren't necessarily having to use a lot of you know um, energy or inertia or whatever you call it to sit down in a chair. You're using heel power to go in a chair. You're not leaning forward to go in a chair. You're leaning backward to go in a chair. Um, and or even when you're going on a couch, whatever seat you're going into, you always lean back to go into it. So your body's built and very well aware of leaning back, so it's set up to prepare for that. It's much more ready for it, and plus you have a lot more muscles that integrate in your flexibility. The flexing of your feet is geared more toward leaning back. 'Cause your calf muscles, the ankle, all that stuff. But when you're leaning forward, it takes a lot more balance, focus, and um, energy to do that. Um, so so yeah, the heel turn is gonna be a lot easier to learn to do because your body's just already knowing how to do that fairly well. Um, I mean, you're probably gonna everyone's experience is different, of course, but you're probably going to you're probably still gonna fall a few times with the heel turn as you're getting used to it. But it's a matter of that's all about learning the right angle of which to steer the board. And even when you're doing that, you're gonna want to lean forward a little bit as you turn in that way. It's literally like as if you're about to sit down in a chair. It's kind of like you lean your head and your shoulders forward a little bit while uh, dipping out your butt kind of deal, putting your butt back a little bit. And certainly bending your knees definitely important regardless. Keep your knees bent. Um, and just putting that pressure on your heels to dig in. Um, and just get the feel for that balance. Getting the feel for that balance is what um, is key, and that takes a few times to kind of get a feel for that. And I think a good method is just you know start down the hill a little bit, and you kind of maneuver through whether it's left or right, depending which foot is in front or not. Um, and then just kind of uh, I don't know what you call it, like scooching down or um, slowly progressing down the hill um, while remaining in that stance, um, like being horizontal to this, or I guess perpendicular, if I remember my geometry correctly, um, perpendicular to the downward slope of the hill. And it's just kind of like basically a method of stopping in snowboarding. Um, so yeah, that will obviously with the videos snowboarding come with practice. But the more difficult maneuver I believe is the heel turn. Um, and I'm slowly starting to get a little bit better at that, but I'm still struggling with that, and I've only snowboarded a few times. Um, but yeah, I think it's very important because it's a lot more involved with snowboarding with regards to balancing. Balancing has a lot more involvement with snowboarding, and using those um, uh, what do you call it, shifting of the balancing with turning and stuff. So it's a lot more important with that. Whereas skiing, your center of gravity is much more stable. Um, Given that you have two platforms for the skis rather than just one platform. Um, but yeah, it's a different but interesting experience. So have fun with it.